So, a few weeks ago, I stumbled upon this old PlayStation 2 at a yard sale in a neighborhood that I didn't really recognize. I was on my way home from work and traffic just seemed worse than usual, so I decided to take an alternative route, and I found this detour that led me down this winding street that I'd never been on before. The yard sale was being run by this elderly woman. You could kind of tell she had a rough life. And she was telling me that she was moving because her husband had recently passed. As we continued chatting, she casually mentioned that the PlayStation that I was looking at had belonged to her son who had gone missing in 2008. I continued to ask a couple more questions about it, and then I finally asked the one that I really wanted to know: was her son ever found? Her eyes got real, distant, and I could tell that something was just off with the conversation, but she did answer me and she said, no, her son was never found, he never turned up. And after that, that's pretty much where that particular conversation ended. So, I backed off of that and I just continued to scan the tables at the yard sale, taking note of other miscellaneous household items that were for sale. I eventually did buy the PlayStation, and I took it home with me, and I was really eager to relive some of that old gaming nostalgia. I began my trip down memory lane by cleaning the system and inspecting the previous owner's game case and all the stuff on all of the memory cards. But as I got along in that process, something felt really off. All of the memory cards were at their max capacity, with strange and incomplete save files, kind of like the data was corrupted. In fact, one file in particular really caught my eye. It was labeled Finding Mom, and even though it still looked like a regular standard game save file, I still felt strange opening it. When I did though, instead of loading up game data, an application for the game Mercenaries popped up. There wasn't a disc in the PlayStation though. It was completely empty still. I instantly gathered that it wasn't the typical Mercenaries game that I remembered. The graphics on the screen were very distorted, very corrupted looking, and the characters in the game looked wrong, man. They were twisted versions of people that I kind of felt like I should know. The map was also eerily familiar, but it wasn't quite my neighborhood. Now, as I continued to explore the game, despite there being no disc in the PlayStation still, this unsettling confirmation finally hits me. I wasn't just playing a game. As I followed the game's path, things got really creepy. I started to notice that the neighborhood in the game that I was walking through was very similar to my own neighborhood, and I got goosebumps instantly. In that moment, I felt compelled to try to find my house. The streets were laid out just like the ones that I grew up on, and after a few twists and turns, I found myself approaching this house that looked way too much like mine. All the way down to the cricket fence and the overgrown bushes, it was all way too uncanny. As I walked up to the door in the game, the screen flickers and a new prompt appears. It's a note that says, it looks like it's written in rushed handwriting. It reads, "Go to the old tree by the park. You'll find what you seek." And I thought, okay, that doesn't make any sense. What am I seeking? But it felt important nonetheless. My heart starts to race in my chest, and I realize that something was hidden just beyond the next turn in this warped version of my own real-life world. I followed the game's instructions. I went towards the closest park that I know of near my house, and now, not only can I feel my heart beating still, but now I can feel my pulse beating as well. The old oak tree by the park appears just ahead on the screen. It looked almost exactly like the one in real life, only it just felt darker and more foreboding. So I walk on, and as I get up to the base of the tree in the game, the screen flickers again, and this time, something new appears. It's an old, weathered photograph that's pinned to the trunk of the tree. I have to squint at the image because the graphics are still really distorted looking, and my heart is still racing. I'm nervous to even look at it. But despite all of that, the picture that was pinned to the tree wasn't in the same art style as the rest of the game. It looked like it was a photorealistic picture. And the man in the picture was somebody that I recognized. Someone that I'd seen before. I stood there, frozen, just staring at the image on the bottom of that tree trunk. My mind starts spinning and racing, just trying to make sense of what was happening. But before I could even start to process what was going on, the game shuts off. The screen just cuts to black, and the PlayStation shuts down and then restarts itself. I try to recreate that sequence, although my hands are trembling now, and I power the system back on, and this time I quickly navigated to that same save file, eager to see if there was more after the tree. And the same sequence plays out. I get to walk through that distorted version of my neighborhood. I get to walk past my house. I follow down the path down the tree, and once again the photo of the man appears. But no matter how many times I repeat that loop over and over, and no matter how many times I load this up to see what was on the other side of the tree, the system just repeatedly restarts itself. There was no continuation. There was no objective or explanation. It was just the same eerie loop over and over that led me to nowhere. But now, I'm thinking to myself, who was the man in the photo? And why did his face look so familiar to me? I was letting myself get more and more worked up over what I was experiencing. On a video game, no less. I couldn't tell where I knew the man in the photo from, but something about it just felt wrong, like I was being drawn into a memory that I couldn't quite access, and it was driving me crazy. I left the PlayStation sitting on the desk while I showered and had some dinner. And the memory of that strange photograph and that endless loop just started to weigh on my mind. I honestly couldn't bring myself to play it again, though. At least not tonight. It felt like the game was just playing with me. It was pulling me deeper into something that I didn't understand. I decided just to pack everything back into the box that I got it in. The PlayStation, the controllers, the memory cards, all of it back into the box. I just didn't want to look at it for a little bit. I was starting to feel a little bit too overwhelmed. I figured maybe I could try to find some answers later when I wasn't so, consumed by the weirdness of it all. The next day was Monday, and I had work in the morning, and I wouldn't even have time to think about it until probably Thursday at the earliest. I somehow decided that going back to that elderly woman's house later in the week was a good idea. I wanted to ask her if she knew anything else about the game. Maybe she was aware of, that I wasn't, or maybe I missed something during our brief conversation. I wanted to ask her about the photograph, and I wanted to ask her about her son and about the connection between the game and her life. I mean, if there even was a connection. After all, her son created a save file that said, "Finding Mom." Maybe she knew what that was about. I left the box of all of the controllers and stuff on the floor and the system quiet for now, and I tried to get some sleep. But, the thought of that photo just kept gnawing at me. I knew that I wouldn't be able to rest until I had answers. Thursday felt like an eternity away, but it was the only time that I'd have to return and dig deeper into this mystery that I had unwittingly uncovered. It's now Wednesday morning, and the thought of the game and the photo and that strange connection was still in the back of my mind. I just couldn't shake it, especially during the more quiet moments of my day. I tried to ignore it and move on, but the image of that man's face just kept haunting me like a ghost that I could not outrun. To try and clear my head a little bit, I figured I'd stop at my favorite bagel shop on the way to work. I could grab a sandwich and some tea, maybe take a deep breath and just ground myself in something normal for a change. As I walk into the bagel shop, it's usually very warm and welcoming, and it always smells great in there, but something caught my eye. Behind the counter, I saw a man that looked just like the person in the photograph from my game. My heart skips a beat. I knew it was him. There was no mistaking it. I came to this place to get away from all this, and here I am, though, confronting it face to face now. I froze in place, just for a moment, completely unable to move, and unable to comprehend what I was seeing. My mind was racing. How could this be? After a very long and very tense second, I managed to gather myself enough to approach this man. I walk up to him, my voice shaky as I introduced myself, and I asked if he had a moment to talk in private. My legs now start to shake as well, and I'm just hoping that he doesn't notice how rattled I actually am. The man's expression shifted in an instant when I began to tell him about the PlayStation and the photograph and the strange connection that I felt to him. His eyes got really wide, and I could feel the disbelief flooding his features. He then grabs my arm, and his grip is tight enough to send a shock of panic through my whole body. He looks me dead in the eyes, and he says, with a voice that's sharp and urgent, "I need to see it now." His tone was so intense that I couldn't respond for a moment. It was like something deep inside him had just snapped. His eyes were locked onto mine, and I couldn't even look away if I wanted to. They seemed desperate and frantic, and I was just paralyzed. I didn't know what to do. Without another word, he yanks me towards the front door of the bagel shop, and we're off. I didn't know what else to do. I let him drag me outside. I wanted to talk to this person, and now I guess I get to. I barely had time to process the events as he hurriedly climbs into the passenger seat of my car, and his urgency had me even more on edge than I was as we drove back to my place. I didn't know if I was making a dangerous mistake, letting this stranger into my car while I drove us to my house, but, at this point, can't go back. When we arrive at my house, I take him inside and I try to steady myself. Even though I could still feel my pulse racing, I led him to my desk and I showed him the box with all the stuff in there. I plug everything back in, and I could feel the weight of the moment just hanging in the air. I showed him the save file that was labeled Finding Mom, and he immediately freezes. He just stares at the screen. He plays through the game in complete silence. The moments passed so slowly, and his face starts to harden as the game plays out. Just sitting there, watching him play through the same loop that I was, in just complete silence, was the most tense thing I'd ever experienced. When he reached the part with the photograph that was tacked to the bottom of that oak tree, I could see him breathing really hard. I could see the recognition in his now burning red eyes. His hands were trembling as he turned to finally look at me, and his voice, barely audible at this point, says, "Where did you get this?" I tell him about the yard sale and about the elderly woman who sold me the PlayStation, and then his face goes white. He logs back onto the screen, and he says, as he's staring dead at the screen now, "That's the house I grew up in. I still own it, but it's been condemned for 17 years. And he starts to trail off, and his words are still kind of hanging in the air until he eventually just stops talking. The intensity in his gaze starts to grow even deeper, as if something about the house, or the game, or maybe both, had unlocked something within him. He tells me, "My mother was kidnapped by my father when I was 7. I lost this PlayStation when I was taken into foster care." 30 seconds pass, and it feels like hours. And then, without another word, he rushes up to pack everything back into the box. He starts moving very stressfully, very quickly, and he's slamming the stuff back into the box and everything, and all the games and everything else in there as well, and he doesn't look at me at all while he's doing this. He didn't even give me a chance to speak. and just as quickly as he came into my house, he's gone. The door slams behind him as he leaves with the box, with the PlayStation and the games and everything else still in his hands. The next day, the bagel shop is closed, and the day after that, it was completely empty with leasing available signs posted all over it. That man never gave me his name, and he never told me where he was going. I have no idea where to find him or if I'll ever even hear from him again. It's been a couple of days now, and I've driven past that house with the yard sale since then just to see if it was still there and what kind of shape it was in. And now I've got more questions than I do answers. This has been probably the most crazy and worst week of my life. If anyone out there has any ideas about what this could mean or what this was, beyond the obvious scary movie answers or whatever, what should I do next? I really don't know my next move. Thank you for listening to me tell this story. Hopefully I did it justice. It's called I Bought an Old PlayStation 2, and it was written by u/WayTooMuchAcc, ACC. Cool person. They wrote this story and they let me share it with you, so for that, I'm grateful. I asked the author if this would be turned into a series eventually because, imagine this PlayStation has multiple save files that are all weird and corrupted kind of feeling, and this is just one of them, right? So imagine opening up all of the save files, and every single save file is its own storyline or plot point to something much larger. I think that'd be cool. I didn't get an answer yet, but, if I do, I'll leave a pinned comment on this video below so you can stay updated, I guess. Hopefully the answer's yes. Let's put it that way. All right, cool. I think that's it. Click subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.